So Judi Richardson is a recognized organizational development expert, visionary, and chief strategist with experience in 12 different countries. Her specialties include establishing, transforming, and advancing business objectives and operations, business startup and turnaround, change management, corporate citizen engagement, and business mergers, acquisitions, and consolidations. Judi has been the recipient of the International Executive Coach of the Year, Canadian Progress Club Woman of the Year, and the SMU Distinguished Community Service Award. She's also received professional certifications in adult education, mediation, diversity and human rights, negotiations, corporate coaching, executive development, and 5 master facilitator certifications. We're very happy to have Judi with us today. So Judi, please take it away.
Thank you. Wonderful to have you all this afternoon. We're going to start talking first about the, okay, so we already have some technical difficulties in moving the slide. There we are. What we're going to start talking about today is, and I'm calling it a journey because this is a conversation, so it's how we set the environment for the conversation, and we're learning more and more that that needs to be done for each and every conversation just to make it that much more productive. So we're going to talk about organizational culture overall, then what a culture of sales might look like. We're going to go into some negotiation styles a little bit because those are really important. And then in terms of sales activity and memberships, etc. To a large degree, we're not going specifically through the sales cycle because I understand you've done that before and this is a bit different level. So when we talk about our time today, what we know from science is that creative intelligence increases during key times when you stop rushing, think less, not more. So the invitation right now is to turn your phone away, turn other things off on the screen, and really sit together for the next hour or the next few minutes, however long you can be with us, to take out of this what you really feel you need to take out of it. We did some research for the Conference Board of Canada, and what we know is that the quality of the sprays that we all create right here directly determines the quality of what emerges in that space. So the bigger question for you today is how you choose to show up. Some healthy skepticism, some questions, having the intention that you're going to have a few nuggets to take away after this is really important because you're investing your time, and time is important. So when we look at organizational culture overall, we're looking at all of this obviously factors in. So you always have the strategic objectives, the vision and values, etc. And then built on that, of course, are the strategic imperatives, those structures, the systems and processes, technology, skills, right over to outcomes, everything you see there. What happens so often when people are creating a new company or existing companies that they're not paying attention to that current operating culture. So that can be some of the soft tissue that's going on that also directly affects productivity. So we know that these are some of the impacts of ignoring that missing link, and this is nothing new. I know I'm talking to a lot of people who've lived a lot of this, whether it's innovation suffers, brand integrity, stakeholder relations, all of those are affected when the organizational culture is not at optimum. The best of the best. So we did some research through the Conference Board of Canada where we went out and spoke to CEOs, mostly Canadian because we could, and did a variety of research, and this will be absolutely nothing new. But we do know that inspired cultures drive prosperity and inspiring leaders drive inspired cultures. So let's stop right there. I know I have all kinds of different levels in this conversation, but those of you who have other people reporting into you, inspiring leaders drive inspired cultures. So what is a strategic imperative for you is to find out what inspires you and to make sure you're staying there absolutely as much as possible. So here's the portrait we took directly from that research out of the Conference Board of Canada. Those leaders have some kind of a highly constructive vision and they're able to share that with others. Alignment. We'll talk a lot about alignment today, and that's aligning mindset, behaviors, and action. Because if the mindset and behaviors are aligned, then action should be happening. We should be executing. They have an attitude of what's right for all. They're humble. They're humane, real, authentic. And I know you're probably starting to think of people. They believe in a community of equals. They'll, be on the line helping others. They're good hosts. So they don't try and overdo for others, but they're good hosts. You will see the pride in their company, their accessible leadership. They have an open door quality, but they're also balanced with enough closed door to be able to get their work done. The balance of fear and inspiration is huge. You need to be able to feel a little bit of fear and risk management. So inspired leadership with an inspired culture is going to give you that prosperity, and we know that culture matters. So these leaders had an inspired relationship with themselves. So yes, they know their doubts, they know what they're not doing well. They hire people who are better than they are at certain areas, and they let those people know that. They have an inspired relationship to fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You're always going to have it. You touch it and say, so what is that literally that is calling to me? What can I learn from this? They have an inspiring relationship to time, so they're not the people who are going to be running around all the time saying we don't have enough time for this, that, and the other. They know their priorities, and they know how to execute on those priorities rather than just creating busyness. They have an inspired relationship to people. They're usually the people that when you meet them, even very, very senior, multi-million-dollar companies, they'll know who empties their garbage can. They'll know other people as much as they will, shareholders, etc. They'll work to build those relationships. And of course, they have an inspired relationship to the truth. I sent a recent handout because a big piece of sales and a big piece of even creating those strategic relationships, etc., is really bound in your bargaining and negotiation style, which also looks at conflict styles. There are many people who consider a negotiation to be highly conflicted. So I sent a document of several pages that you can use yourself, and you can take others through. If you look down through those pages, there's a checklist. You can also obviously do these types of profiles online, and you can pay to have your group do them. But basically what you're looking at is we all have a preferred, I usually call it a habitual pattern, where we move to when we're under stress or something else. So those people who are low on uncooperative and very high on assertiveness, then those are going to be those people who are really pushing and competing all the time. So it's interesting to note, we had, I was just saying to Jenny, I'm part of the CEO program. We had 5 companies that needed to meet with their business plans to negotiate around $500,000 interest-free loans. And we did this with them ahead of time simply because they needed to know their own styles before they went in. So we had one person who knew that she was highly conciliatory, highly accommodating. And so when things came down to the wire, she would often give up, or she would avoid. That wasn't going to serve her well as she was moving through any kind of a negotiation or bargaining. So you need to know those before you go in. That can also mean that you have certain people within your organization who are better at the different stages of a sales cycle. They might be the great person to start a relationship, but they may not be the person to continue the relationship, and they may not be what you and I know as a closer. The other piece that comes up when you're negotiating and bargaining is always making sure that you're doing preparation ahead of time, and I sent you one of Colleen Francis's articles. But there's a book, Beyond Reason, and everybody knows about the books at the bottom of this page, Getting to Yes, Getting Past No. They're excellent books, and they're very simple books around the Harvard Negotiation Project. But what happened in the beginning is these books were out and people were practicing them, but they were forgetting to take emotions into their reasoning and their planning. And what we know is when you walk into a room, 70% of the people in that room will wait to see whether you're collaborative or adversarial, and they'll meet you there. So your best alternative to a negotiated agreement and worst alternative, always know that before you go in. And that might be dictated by your sales manager or somebody else, but you yourself need to know before you go in that room what would be the best and what would be the worst. And I tend to ask myself a couple of questions before, and sales teams when we go in, before we even go in with in a prospect, we're going to ask ourselves what we know. What are the facts about this prospect before we meet with them? And then what's really important is to check your assumptions. So what have we heard or read? What do we assume about the prospect that we can possibly confirm before we go in? And then what do both the buyers and I need to accomplish in the meeting? And you can use meeting loosely. It might even be when you're networking. When I'm talking to somebody, is there an action at the end of this I want to see? So that best alternative to a negotiated agreement and worst alternative give you a scale before you go in, and you can be very clear on it. And then decide when you walk in the room based on that 70% how you want to show up. Because change is what it means to lead. How you deal with that negotiation, etc., is a very important thing for you to know and to strategize ahead of time. And your organization is evolving, so there's a lot of change management going on, but how you understand emotions are important. So there used to be assumptions that there were two parts to a negotiation. Substance, you want to get the best deal, and the relationship would just literally be left out of it. Will needs to deal with them again later was completely left out, so now we've brought back in what comes at the expense of the relationship. When you think of people who go on when there's a strike and the managers have to work together after, they forget that. So you want to maximize your ability to build a relationship and reach a win-win. So you can use reason, you can take the problem and analyze it and come to logical conclusions. It's important, but it's not enough. Those positive emotions, that engaging with them in terms of enthusiasm, creativity, collegial attitude, they all help to sustain the agreement. And I know several of you probably already do this. I've seen people naturally walk in a room and they'll establish rapport as they walk in. And so easy to do that. You walk in and you see people usually have something in their office that speaks to them. If you're meeting in their office, you might notice their family. You might notice the fact that they have fishing pictures on the wall. You might notice the fact that they're sailors. So there's a way to establish some rapport before you go in. But in Beyond Reason, the work that was done at Harvard, they talked about core concerns and using them as a lens to understand if there seems to be conflict or not. And you can use these as a lever and address the concerns. So remember always, anytime you're doing any kind of work, separate the behavior from the person, always. So rather than getting caught up in an emotion, so you might be in a sales meeting and you've put something out and then this person starts cutting down your product, your service, these things that you've spent, you know, a lifetime researching, you've got to stay out of the emotion and get to the behind those emotions in terms of what's generating them. So the 5 core concerns Fisher and Shapiro have isolated are core concerns, are human wants that are important to absolutely everyone in negotiation, in bargaining, in any way. They're even experienced as the negotiator. So anybody who's experienced in sales, you have to know that about yourself. Those 5 are appreciation, autonomy, affiliation, status, and role. And I'll go through those really quickly. Appreciation, we all know, there's so much written about that right now, is a powerful instrument. I'm someone that feels you should use a strategic appreciation. So let somebody know specifically what you appreciate, especially in the workplace, and you then help mold the behavior you want to see. But people feel not understood, devalued, unheard. 5 to 1 stay in a marriage when they feel appreciated. U.S. Department of Labor, #1 reason organizations fail is the employees don't feel appreciated. So remember your internal customers. So from appreciation point of view, learn to empathize, validate, really try to understand their perspective and find merit in what they think, feel, or do, especially if you don't agree. There's a way to be able to build that rapport and communicate that. Autonomy means they need freedom to make decisions. So for instance, if you change a time or a room of a meeting without asking, especially if you do it a couple of times, people they're not even going to pay attention. The content won't be a problem. The problem was you moved the meeting 3 times without even asking them if it worked for them. Affiliation are some of those emotional connections. So as I said earlier, that idea of walking into somebody's office and you might have gone to the same university. The area of the brain that feels pain also feels rejection, and you lose focus and concentrate on the pain and what caused it rather than the negotiation, the bargaining, the sales meeting that's happening, or even internal meetings within your organization. So you build those structural connections. What connects us? Again, that could be the picture as you walk in. It could be just finding out a little bit about the person. Did they go to the same university? Do they windsurf? What do they do that you might have the same status as that next one? You're standing in relation to another, so respect that social status. So I've worked in several different countries. I work with other cultures, so I learn something about that social status before I go to make sure that I respect that, especially in a different culture. And again, everybody wants to fulfill a meaningful role. So even in a sales meeting, even if you've moved through, you've closed the deal and you're moving on to the next person, there is a way to build those connections and make sure that they are fulfilling some kind of a meaningful role. So in a culture of sales, you are looking to have your staff as ambassadors. And I talked earlier about treating your staff as internal customers. Pay attention to their customer service. How are we treating them? How are we engaging them? Are they feeling heard? Do they have input? Now, there are those within your organization who won't feel heard because they have a pattern of not feeling heard, and then you need to deal with that a little bit differently. There are those, especially in your research organizations, that you have as risk managers. They're supposed to see the risk in things. So those are the people who could come across as negative, but actually they're offering something very positive. Every staff member, and this is a measure, should be an ambassador for your company. So if I walk into one of you that I happen to know in Sobeys Superstore, Tim Hortons, Starbucks, something, hey, how's it going? And if I then get this litany of how overworked I am and how hard life is, et cetera, instead of, wow, I'm working at this really great company, having a ball, et cetera, that's the type of ambassador you need, because that's when people are going to say, wow, tell me more. Then you have everyone in your company networking for you, because every staff member is a source of leads and prospects. And as they learn more about the leads, they'll learn how to qualify and bring prospects right to the door. And who doesn't want that? So when we talk a bit more about sales itself, I think what's really important is those three things: why we lose business. So we don't or won't sell. We have our heads down doing the work with no time set aside for working on the business, and that's big in terms of research. And then no one knows we exist, and that can happen with research too. So if you can take some of the successful components of that curiosity, that tenacity and follow through that comes when you're right in the heart of research and on the tip of making something happen, those are the things you're going to bring back to sales. And as we bring those back, you take every opportunity for networking in whatever way works for you. But again, the alignment of mindset, behavior, and actions. So there are times when you shouldn't be networking, and you'll know those times. So maybe you need to send somebody else to a strategic networking session for you. Jenny sent me out a list of who registered, and there's a wide variety, so it's hard to single-handedly move in to know where you all should be investing most of your networking time. There's a strategic way to sit back and say, so the people that I want to reach, where will they be? And then think about your style of networking. How do you best have conversations? And rehearse some of the things you want to say. So when somebody says, what do you do? Speak in terms of your successes. Speak in terms of your client successes. Never lead with your own product and service, because that closes down the conversation right away. So heads down doing the work with no time set aside for working on the business. You need to automate something. If it's we don't or won't sell, you need to bring somebody in, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, to really talk about why that doesn't happen and how we reframe that. And you might even look for somebody to do some lead generation for you so that you then go in after with your information. And no one knows we exist. That's an easy one. If nobody knows you exist, then there's no way they can find you to access your product or service. So talking about that productive mindset for selling, so there we have mindset, behaviors, and actions again. There's a great TED Talk, Simon Sinek says, about why. And that's that piece of knowing your product or service so well, knowing what it can do. And face it, when you talk about BioNB, you have some amazing research that can change things for humans, they change things for the earth, they, just make life better over and over for all of us, and they're essential. So we're invested with getting that sales motion going, getting people behind and ahead of why people need to have that product or service. So great sellers are able to understand why they sell the product and how it genuinely helps their customers. And those things result in a natural sales process and experience. A productive mindset is one that makes the best use of your resources, your time, your energy, and your efforts. Those are the three. Before you bring anything, technology or anything else in, you need to have that strategy. So it's not trying to do or be everything to everybody, or even doing it in the quickest way possible. It's making the most and best of what you have while enjoying the process. So that's a biggie, enjoying the process while you're doing it. And if you're not enjoying it in the beginning, then number one, you have to work on your own mindset and behaviors and align that before you go into sales, or you need somebody else doing it. It's that simple, and this is that important. And that's an easy thing to do. So some people are motivated by saying what's possible when I go and learn how to sell this and learn how to speak it in a way people can hear it. Other people are motivated by what will I lose if I don't do it. So what's the potential, or what will I lose if I don't do it? And many of you who are the senior executives, especially in a research organization, you are so passionate about this discovery and what it can do for people. And so whether it's going out looking for financing or whether it's selling, which by the way are two different skills. I've had people where I've received like a 3 or 4 page document that I'm not going to read all the way through. It's not written in a way that I can even understand it. It's written in a way you can understand it because you are passionate and you've been in that process of developing and bringing it to the world. And that's a beautiful process to be in, but there's a mindset hack of learning how to say that quickly in the way other people can hear it. And again, making the most and best of what you have while enjoying the process. So in order to make the most of who we are and what we have, there's certain qualities or characteristics that assist us in accomplishing that. And those are, as I said, the mindset, behavior, and action. I want to talk a little bit about some of the communication hurdles right now because they're things that we need to be aware of. Number one, I'm sure everybody on the call is overwhelmed by the sheer volume, whether it's phone calls, whether it's emails. When we're a startup, there's always lots to be done. And that strategic reflection time that is really, really important can come back and bite us if we don't take the time to even sit down and really take a deep strategic look at what strategic relationships might be right for us at any time. But when you're going out to have a sales meeting, to make a cold call, to make a warm call, to pick up email, to go to a networking event, everybody there is overwhelmed by the sheer volume of work and of their lives. It is now acceptable to not return a call or email. So there will be many of us who remember that in business especially, you never didn't return a call, ever. And the same with email, you always returned email. So when you're working within your sales cycle and you're sending out some emails for lead or prospects, or you're moving to that next level, you need some tracking mechanism because you can send emails out and know they're out there and they're going to come back, but it's completely acceptable for somebody to not return a call or email. And I may be saying in that call or email that I have a call to action. Another mindset hack, you have to make sure you're following through. So, and it's a great tool to say, hi, Jenny, would like to tell you a little bit more of the services we have for your folks at BioNB. I'm going to leave my phone number. However, if I don't hear from you, I'll try calling you next Tuesday morning. So again, I may not hear back from her, but if I said I'm calling next Tuesday morning, I need to do it. Everyone is in decision fatigue. So they, the book according to they, is saying that we make 34,000 decisions daily. So when you're reaching out to somebody, help them make a decision. And one of the great tools for that is using the term I recommend. Whether or not we make 34,000 decisions daily is up in the air, but when you think from the moment you get up, all of the different decisions, even one email coming in, there can be 5 or 6 decisions that need to happen out of that. So when you're negotiating, when you're a sales meeting, when you're looking for that lead generation, even again, your own internal customers, how can you help them in making a decision for them? And so you're making sure you're not asking them for too much. Again, I would like to speak to you. I'm available these 3 different times and 3 different dates. I'm going to be in Toronto on these dates. I can meet with you at these times, which work best for you. Easy for that person to go to their calendar and slot something in. In fact, sometimes even if they were going to say no, if you make it that easy, they will do it. So I'm sure that's something all of you are living. Everyone's overwhelmed by sheer volume. It's acceptable to not return a call or email, and everyone's in decision fatigue. So let's help them make a decision and automate that in every way you can, even your internal customers. Because the telemarketing industry, everyone is now on the defensive. So when your crew, so even if you're using somebody to do lead generation for you, when they reach out, then they see a number that they don't recognize, that will be the first line of defense and they won't answer it. Not using an 866 or those numbers obviously will work. However, at the same time, reducing the defensiveness is important. So rather than when somebody answers the phone making slight chit-chat, how about getting right to the point? And Jenny has a question.
Hi, Judy.
Hi.
So you're talking about when people start that sales process and how people are on the defensive when they get contacted. I'm wondering, just as a general guideline, would you suggest that someone make the first point of contact over email, by telephone, or in some other way?
Really great question. What I have found over the years working with people, you all will have a natural style. So there are those who constantly go to networking things. They will invest in networking things because for them, face-to-face works best. They're natural in a room. They're natural talking people. They will do those things we talked about earlier. They will establish rapport. They will find some kind of connection with the person. And then when they go away from them, they'll send an email reminding them of that connection and looking to build something. Obviously, the warmer the contact, the better. So if you can find something, if you have somebody who can, I mean, we can Google everything. Remember, on LinkedIn, you can go and look at people anonymously. And if you don't know how to do that, ask somebody how to do it because it's important. However, from a networking perspective, it's also really interesting to go and check somebody out and let them see you've been checking them out because they're liable to go check you out and learn more about your business. Because of that defensiveness, you need to find out the other side. So I might email Jenny, but Jenny's more of a phone person. I'm not going to find that out right away. So my suggestion to that would be to find out what is most natural for you and start there. So I work with and recommend lead generation people to many different people, and a lot of them are many different companies, especially lean companies that need somebody to do that work for them outside of the company. And many of those people have their established routines that automate touch points. So they might send an email first saying, I'm going to call you Monday afternoon. I'll call around 2. If you're not free, I'll call back. The art of using the phone, and there are several, we have some maritime folks, but others, the phone lady, etc., who are talking about that. So even as in, we have PowerPoint in this webinar to keep us focused. When you're on the phone, do the same. Have your points. Whether you're going to a sales meeting, have your points and have those really well articulated to take forward. But again, because of the telemarketing, when you reach out, help reduce that defensiveness in any way you can right in the very beginning. If they pick up the phone, or even if you're leaving a voicemail, try to get right to the point of why you're calling and how you can help them. Remember, don't lead with your product or service. Another piece that we wanted to talk about in the sales cycle, and that beautiful back and forth of the sales cycle, customer service, and product development. The first thing is I always talk about the ABCs in sales, and that usually means always be closing. The other side of that is always be in conversation. So building a product or a service is the purpose of a startup, but product development, we are finding in many ways, can get in the way of learning about customers. And what that means is being more product-centered. So it front loads. So what happens is customer involvement is during the requirements and gathering phase. We go out, we talk to people, we have people experience it, but then there's this large middle area where the startup tends to disengage from the customers. And so there's a number of examples. So, and sometimes it's even blatant. We've gone out with some companies, taken a software product to the customers, and the customers have said, wow, this is really fabulous. If it did this, this, and this, I would use it more. Or this is really great, but I wouldn't use it in terms of this kind of this application. I would use it in this application. And we've gone right back to the company with that feedback, and the company just doesn't want to hear it. And again, if you're the one that has done the product development and you need it to work a certain way, you can be dead in the water if you're not open to some of this feedback and tweaking. You don't ever do whatever, you don't want the customer to drive your business, but there is some conversations that can be very helpful. So you're vulnerable if you're building something without any feedback from what customers want. And they can't hold all the answers. And the famous quote we all know, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I've worked with several companies who have said, you know, because of Henry Ford's quote, it's too hard working with customers and in customer services asking them what they want. So we'll just forget it. But I think there's a gem in that quote. So the customer said faster horses. What they would really have been asking for is something faster than their existing alternative, which happened to be horses at that point. And what Henry Ford did is said, I'm going to give you something faster than your existing alternative. So there's just a little bit of a reframe. And getting people who think differently than you, those of you who are in startups, you go out and you recruit these really great people, and then if there's one thing that is difficult is when you don't listen to them. You bring in intentionally people who think differently from you, listen to them. Again, it doesn't mean that you're going to assimilate all the information, but please, at some point, take that time to reflect on what's being said right in front of you. So given the right context, customers can clearly articulate their problems. And then it's your job to come up with a solution. So it's Steve Jobs. We all know this one too. It's not the customer's job to know what they want. If many years ago, and if you remember many years ago, not so many years ago, the Wang, Chairman Wang came out with this amazing platform, robust platform for servers, and he said, you know, that you just can't connect desktops properly, etc. And he was right at the time, but you know, many went ahead, and now, of course, we're all walking around with laptops. So at certain time, it's simply talking to customers or running surveys and focus group, but there's also other learning tactics that, when they're deployed correctly, yield the fastest way to both learn and build what customers want. Their surveys, your focus groups are great, but actually going in and spending time with customers, bringing people together to actually use it. I ran a retail proof of concept technology retail proof of concept in the US, and we took it right to people and had them actually learn it, both those people who would need to administer the service, the retail service, technology service, and those who would use it, and watch them as they moved through it and got some feedback right there. And there are, of course, I'm sure there are a number of people on this webinar, and please do examples of what you've done. Learning from each other is key in this case. So what we want to talk about, obviously, what we're all looking for is that consistent revenue. We're looking for consistent relationship and always being in conversation. So we take you back to the ideas of networking again and finding out what networking functions are out and around you, what conferences that are best for you. I have called conference organizers and said, can I speak to a few, can you put me in touch, because they don't want to give it out, but can you give my name, my email, my phone number to a few people who have attended your conference before? So you're actually looking for referrals, and call them and say, was this of value to you? Join your chambers of commerce, but again, you need to work a chamber of commerce. So is this the time to do that? Are there different memberships that are simply a point of passion for you? Are you working with junior achievement? Basically any of those, and bring those back to the group in any way. If you truly believe that we bring amazing experience to business, so if you have a product or a service that basically is going to change the world, then your number one job is to let those people know that you exist in one way or another. That's your number one job. Jenny's a marketer, so she would agree with that wholeheartedly. What you have to offer, if you believe truly that what you have to offer is of value, then they need to know about you to make the best decisions for their firm, for their association, for their municipality, for whatever. They need to know about you to make the best decision. Even if they don't choose your company, they need to know about you to make that best decision, and you need to have that primordial confidence behind you when you're going out. And again, you want to fail forward faster. So is it the content? What am I putting out? Are people really hearing what we're putting out there? And again, frustration might come up for you. What we know is that frustration is simply potential rising. Let me say that again. Frustration is simply potential rising, because when I work with my executives and they get frustrated, pearls are made from grit and irritation, so I love it. It's like, okay, stop right there. If you're frustrated, stop right there. Let's deconstruct it a little bit, and there's always something really exciting behind it. I want to talk a little bit about social selling, because it takes out pitching. You're creating conversations about your product and services, which originally can produce sales conversations, and it's the development manager at Binocular that made that statement that I think is key. So let's talk about social selling. You're on a webinar right now. There's a way for you to slip in. Jenny has said if you have questions, feel free to type it in the questions panel. So I could say, Judi from C-Level Executive Solutions, we provide these solutions to our clients. Can you comment on so-and-so? Boom. So there's 20, 30 people on this webinar. You've just gotten that out there, but you're still asking a specific question. Social selling in terms of Facebook, you know them all. Whether it's the brand that you portray on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram. There's 100 different places to put things now. So there are social media consultants out there in every province in this country, etc., that for a very small investment can sit down with you. You can do the Google research yourself, but social selling basically is a conversation about your company, a conversation about your product or service, what it can do for people. And it's a fascinating part to get out there. But remember, you are your brand. So people will say, look, I'm over on LinkedIn, et cetera, and I'm just, that's my business professional side, and then I'm over here on Facebook. Well, Google yourself. Facebook is going to come up. And people will look at Facebook, and if that brand is not aligned with what you're putting out business-wise, then people are going to see it. So remember that side of social selling, and you are the brand in one way or another. Jenny, go ahead.
I find it very interesting that you mentioned social media and the social selling conversation, because I was curious. I've had a lot of folks kind of talk about how does an entrepreneur separate their sales pitch and their business and their startup from their personal life and their personal friendships? How do you keep those separate while also representing your brand when you're talking about yourself and what you do every day?
And that's the piece, I think, Jenny, that we were just saying. If you're online, everybody sees you. So the biggest way to separate that is to make sure that you're keeping your I keep my private life private. You know, I mean, that sounds trite, but I'm on Facebook simply because I have children around the world and friends around the world, and I want to be able to keep in touch with them. I'm mindful every time I post on Facebook that is my brand. It's who I am. So it's a little bit more personal. And then I have several, when we look at doing some customer interactions, etc., we might have a secret page on Facebook or something, or on LinkedIn. What people tend to think, though, is they can just put anything on Facebook, and many people are dropping off of Facebook because some of it just gets ridiculous. But so remember, anything you put online, people can find anything. So if I want to go and have a beer with friends, I want to do that, you know, or a glass of wine or something. I'm going to sit completely offline, completely away from other people, and have those conversations. Those actually are essential, because the other strategic imperative here, especially in a startup and especially with people who are doing sales, is extreme self-care. And you need to make sure that you're taking, as I said earlier, inspired leaders lead to inspired cultures. So I have to find out what that inspiration is. So social selling is always happening. You're always in conversation when you're in there, whether it's Twitter. Now, you might be a little bit more lighthearted in Twitter. Just make sure you're not going to put anything out there that's going to turn somebody off, or that's a mindset, behavior, and actions. When those three are aligned, if I put something out that isn't aligned with the values and how I want people to see my brand, then I'm out of alignment, and that can cause some confusion. So I want to talk a little bit with people who are here. Let's come down to the quick when it comes to sales. So sales. So what we're talking about is a simple algorithm. So say I want the average worth of one new customer for somebody, whether it's a product or service, is $2,000. And this business says they want to generate from new business this year $200,000. Maybe they're already at $800,000 and they want to get to $1 million. Or many of the businesses I work with, I have one at $75 million. They're looking to get to $85 million this year. So that is a different conversation. So for this business, they want to get 200,000 new business this year, and their average worth of one new customer is 2,000. So what we know is 1 out of 10. So this is in the sales industry, and you can find it anywhere. What they say, again, in the sales industry, is you will close 1 out of 10 people that you speak to. So based on this algorithm, you need 100 new customers to create that revenue, which means if you multiply that by the magic 10, we need to make 1,000 new contacts this year, 83 per month, 21 per week, with that average of 1 in 10 closes. Social selling becomes that much more important. The strategic relationships, that networking, what networking sessions I go to, my intention before I walk in the door, my actions, how I collect people's business cards or scan them or write them down or connect with them on LinkedIn right there. There's a lot that can be done with our smartphones, etc. right now. All of those, then what I'm doing is everybody around me sees that I'm constantly in growth mode. And you need that, especially with all of your managers, executives, etc., within your organization. People need to see that I'm constantly in growth mode. And if I honestly, literally believe in the value of our product or service 100%, then how can I not be in growth mode? So when I do this with people and they're saying, wow, our average worth of one new customer is a lot less than that, so they need to be talking to more people. Or even if they look at that 21 people per week, how are we going to do that? Twitter? I mean, easy to get in front of at least 21 people a week. But you want to come down to specifically how you're going to make those contacts and how you're going to leverage them. And then over time, you're going to get feedback from sales cycle as well. So this is the end of the formal part of the webinar, but definitely opening this up. Please obviously share your questions, but share your own tips. I'm sure everybody here would love to hear what your own tips, what your own wins might be and successes.
As everyone's sort of thinking about their questions or kind of picking up the confidence to speak, I had one more question about what you said about all of your employees being ambassadors. Does that mean that you need to communicate your pitch to everyone? Does everyone need to know your sales pitch, or is there something more subtle going on?
I think both. That's a really good point, Jenny. Both. I would always, everybody within the organization should know. I was testing customer service for a business, and I called through, and I did some work with Zappos for a while down in the U.S. and did some work with a company here. So I was working with their incoming calls and called to ask a question. And to one of them, what I put was, I put specific questions of product, but then I went back and said, I have a meeting with your CEO and I'm running late and I don't have their direct line. How can you help me? Because I don't want to waste their time. And I had the CEO's name and information about them that would let this person know that I'm just not some crackpot trying to get through to somebody. Fascinating. I mean, one person didn't even know who the CEO was. And because I didn't give the name the first time. Another person had no way of getting from what he was doing at his desk, because it was outsourced, through to anybody at head office. He didn't even have access to it. So you test those feedback loops yourself, but don't put people on edge, but at different times sit down and ask folks in your organization, what is it we do here? And make it as simple as possible. And then, when you're walking by their desk, again, just say, so if I were to meet you in Sobeys right now, what would I hear you say? So you're starting to plant in their mind. I work a lot over the years with elite athletes, and you use that whole tactics of visualization. So help your employees visualize that by you're actually role-playing it. If I were to meet you at Tim Hortons or something like that and asked what you're doing now, what would you say to me? And help them actually help them pitch it that way. So they're actually pitching to you and back and forth in a friendly way, because that's how it would be. You'll start to notice those people who have an habitual pattern of negative or non-productive behaviors or conversations. They see things in that way. And so you can help them reframe that when they come in the door. Does that answer your question, Jenny? Do you have another?
That was perfect, and that's great advice. I had actually a question about LinkedIn specifically. You mentioned it that it's a great tool to do some research and to get to know folks individually. Do you have any advice on whether it's a good idea to make that initial sales contact actually through the LinkedIn messaging function?
Yes, yes, always. And of course, you can get it, Sales Navigator, etc., through LinkedIn. There are a number of booklets out there that are free. I know Sandler Training and a few other put some booklets out about how to use LinkedIn in that way. And I think there's probably a lot of very cost-effective courses and things you could take. What I like to do, even if I don't know somebody well, because we all know there will be those people who popped up on LinkedIn and you're like, why would I don't even know this person, especially when you see somebody who has 5,000 contacts. I'll reach out to them through LinkedIn, and I've done this for several people lately. Somebody was, they moved to Toronto, and there was a company they wanted to get through in the U.S., and I had met somebody. So I actually reached out to that person and said, look, I want to introduce you to Jenny Kelleher. She's from New Brunswick. She works with startups, etc. And they took it from there and had a conversation. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. So go to Jenny's LinkedIn, see what companies she's involved with, and if there's a company there you want to deal with, then you just go to Jenny and say, Jenny, would you introduce me to so-and-so? And it's really easy for Jenny to do that. But the messaging function, I often reach out to people that way. And again, if you do 10, some people don't, reply to their emails, etc. But test your content. So what are you saying?